Alright, we're going to finish up the life of Saul tonight. So we're going to be in chapter 30 and 31. We've been talking about our themes, that God is the true king, and that he's always good, he's always blessing and protecting his people and opposing his enemies. Okay? As we've seen, we're going to see that again. Both of those things again this evening. Alright, and here's the parallels. I don't think I've really added anything on this one since last time, but we'll keep adding to this. So this is the outline we've been going on. So as we've seen the fall of Saul there at the end of the book, and we're going to complete the fall of Saul. It's been kind of a long, drawn out process, but we'll complete that and have the rise of David after today. All right. Let's have a prayer then before we begin. Almighty God, we thank you for blessing us and for taking care of us, for looking out for us. Thank you that we can be here safely. We pray that for any that are still on the roads and all of us can go home. This evening we pray for those who are sick and can't be here, and we just pray that you will bless us, help us to trust you through the difficulties of life, and help us as we study together this evening and in the classes, and every time that we come together, that we will be studying your word and growing in your service. In Christ that we pray. Amen. All right, so the last couple chapters then, we've kind of gone back and forth between Saul and David. So when we last saw Saul, I guess at the end of chapter 28, what's going on with Saul? Yeah.
He went to the witch and to talk to Samuel.
Okay, and why did he do that?
Because God left him.
Yes, okay. All right. So he's facing the Philistines, right? Up in Aphek, the Philistines have come against him, and he was worried about it. He was afraid. He went to see the witch of Endor and got bad news through Samuel. The witch did call up Samuel, and he got bad news that God has left him. And so God says that he's opposed to him at this point. Okay, so that kind of ends there. Chapter 28. He's against the Philistines. Where is David? Yeah. Okay, he's with the Philistines. All right, so he is at Ziklag. We'll talk about that. But then he goes up with the Philistine king Achish to go up to the battle at Aphek to face off against Saul and Israel. But what happens there in chapter 29? Yes?
They refuse him to go because they're afraid that he's going to turn on them.
Yeah, okay, so you kind of have this discussion between the king of Achish and his officers, his commanders. His commanders don't want David there because they're afraid he's going to turn around and fight against them. But Achish wants him there because he trusts him. But in the end, Achish sends him home and says, well, I trust you. I really want you to be at the battle, but, these commanders, they don't trust you, so it's just better if you go home. So like we talked about, it doesn't really say exactly what David would have done, but I think we can tell what he would have done based on his character and also based on some things we see afterwards. He's kind of spared from making that decision. He gets sent back to Ziklag. All right? So we pick that up then in chapter 30. David and his men come back to Ziklag. Now we talked about Ziklag. What is that city? Okay, it was a Philistine city, but now
David and his men own it.
Yeah, okay, so Achish gave it to David and his men, okay? So back in chapter 27, and from there, David has been going out on raids, including against the Amalekites, all right? So David comes back home. It's a 3-day journey. He gets back to Ziklag, and what does he find?
It's been raided.
Okay, it's been raided. Karen?
Well, she said that it had been raided, and they took all of their family and the people who lived there, their animals, their possessions, everything.
Yeah, okay, so it's been raided by who? The Amalekites. All right, so these are some of the people that David's been raiding when he went out and raids from Ziklag. Okay, so it's the city's been burned down. All the people's taken captive. They didn't kill anyone, but so while David and his men are off at the battle site, then the city gets burned. They take people captive, including David's wives. We're specifically told. All right, so it's really everyone's wives, but specifically including David's wives. How do the people react to that when they come back and find us?
Pretty well.
Yeah.
They were kind of mad at David.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They wanted to kill David.
Yeah, okay, so verse 4 says they wept until they had no more strength to weep.
Right.
Alright, so they're obviously extremely upset. That's what you'd expect if you could imagine yourself in that situation. But then, like Dale said, they kind of turn on David here, alright? So in fact, to the point that it says they spoke of stoning him. Okay, they were ready to kill David. So if you think about, kind of the burden of David's leadership here, he ends up taking the blame, which is what tends to happen when something goes wrong. Even if it's not, the person in charge's fault, he's going to get the blame for it. Who are these people? Who are these people that are with David? And what have we found? What have we learned about them in the past?
They're all misfits.
Yeah, okay, these are misfits. These are people who have been distressed. Back in chapter 22, they were called bitter in soul, which is what it says they are now when they see this. Okay, they're misfits, they're people who are distressed, and they're poor, okay, and they've come to David and he's been protecting them this whole time. Okay, he's been taking care of them. They come to him for protection, but now things go wrong, and they're ready to kill him. All right, even though it's not his fault, but they're ready to kill him. How does David handle that? What is David? Okay, first of all, he has the same problem, right? He's greatly distressed himself. His wives have been taken just like everybody else's. Okay. And he's got the problem that they're all ready to stone him. So what does he do? How does he handle that?
You take it to the Lord. Right.
Oh, yeah. Take it to the Lord, right?
That's right.
In verse 6 there, David strengthened himself in the Lord his God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Remember Jonathan? Remember when Jonathan came to him in chapter 23 and said that Jonathan strengthened his hand in God? Very similar kind of phrase here, but here he doesn't have Jonathan, but he strengthened himself in God. So he takes it to God, right? He's not relying on himself, and this is what we've seen. We've seen without the Psalms, throughout the Psalms. When David has a problem, he goes to God about it. And that's what he does here. So he strengthened himself in God. Not just strengthened himself, but he strengthened himself in God, right? Using God's strength, God's encouragement, okay?
He goes to the priest to get the ephod.
Okay, and to get the ephod, and what does he do with that?
He inquires of the Lord.
Okay, he inquires of the Lord. All right, so he asks God what to do. So he has the ephod now from Abiathar, so he uses it for good. He asks God what to do. Okay, and notice there's a contrast here from Saul, chapter 28, who was not hearing from God because God had left him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. David can ask God what to do, and he does. Okay? And so he asks God specifically, should I pursue after the people? Will I overtake them? And does God answer?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and what does he say? Yes. You should overtake them. You should go, and you will overtake them. Okay? And does David do it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so here's a model, right? When we are in great distress, when we are weeping until we can't weep anymore, strengthen ourselves in God, go take it to God, ask God what to do, and obey what he says. All right, now we don't have an ephod, we don't get a direct answer in the same way, but we still get answers and direction from God, right? In different ways. And so it's the same model how to handle distressing situation. Okay, so he does it. He goes out with the 600 men who are with him. All right, so here's kind of a map of what's going on here. All right, so you see all the way. So this is kind of zoomed in here towards the Philistine territory there. So you see all the way at the top, the north is Aphex, that's towards the north of the Philistine territory. That's where they're gathering for battle, Philistines versus Israel. So when David returns, he has to travel down from Aphek all the way down to Ziklag here, towards the southern, on the border there of the Philistine territory. Now, in order to go after the Amalekites are down here in the south. So it talks about them crossing the brook Besor, which you see there. Okay, so he's going to travel down south of Ziklag, back down towards Amalek territory in order to chase after them. Okay, what happens when they get to the brook?
They get tired.
Okay, yeah, they're tired. All right, now remember, they've just completed a 3-day journey down from Aphek. Okay, so now they're going down further towards the brook, and at this point they are tired. 200 of them are too exhausted to continue, so they stay there. They keep the provisions and the supplies and everything there. 400 men go on. All right.
Mm-hmm.
On their way to try to find these guys, they find an Egyptian. And what's his condition when they find him? Yeah, he's ill. Why?
He had to eat for 3 days.
Yeah. Okay? He hasn't eaten. And they're in the wilderness territory right now. Okay, what we would call desert. Okay? So they're out in the desert. This guy, they just find this guy. And so before they can talk to him, David is going to take care of him. All right? And that's what he does. David finds people in distress and he takes care of them. Okay? And this is his kind of his default attitude. That's what he does here. And we're going to find out, unlike the man's own masters, who did not take care of him, David's going to take care of him. All right? And then he's going to talk to him and find out who is this guy.
He's an Egyptian and a slave of an Amalekite.
Okay, he's an Egyptian, but he was a slave to an Amalekite. Okay? Specifically, what Amalekite? Or what Amalekites? Yeah. Yeah, the ones that have been outrated, okay? Raided. So he was a slave from this band that had gone out, and they not only raided Ziklag, they've been raiding other places, including places in Judah. Alright, so they had been raiding Israelite territory in Judah as well. So, he and David make a deal, and what's the deal?
They could lead them, leading these men to the location of this village. He said, I'll do that if you promise not to.
Yeah.
Or hand me over to my.
Yeah, okay? Yeah, Karen.
Well, he promised to take them because he incriminated himself when he said, we heard. He said right there that he was involved there.
Yeah.
That's why he wanted to be protected.
Yeah, so David wants him, he doesn't know where this raiding band is, so he wants him to take them to the Amalekites. He says he'll only do it if David won't kill him. Mm-hmm. Okay? Which, like you said, he might, because he was part of the ones who was, raiding. But also if he won't return him to his master. Because obviously his master isn't treating him well either. The master left him for dead. So they agree to the deal, and David then is able to find out where they are in verse 16. They find them. They're spread abroad. When he goes, he takes them to the place. They're spread abroad. They're eating and drinking. They're celebrating. They've taken all this spoil. They've done all this raiding. They've taken all this spoil. So David attacks, and who wins? David. Okay. David wins the battle. And when they find nothing missing. All their stuff, including all the people. Alright? It says David brought back everything. All the people, David's wives, everyone's, wives, all the people, all the spoil. Plus, then they get additional spoil from the Amalekites. All of their stuff, all the stuff they've been raiding from other places, now is David's. Okay? So they're able to return and go back to Ziklag with all the people, all the stuff, and additional. Right? So God turns even this, whereas the day before they were weeping until he could weep no more, even this turns into a blessing for David. Right? He's better off than he was before. Okay?
So that had to be a rare thing for you to be able to retrieve anything that was taken in a race like that.
Yeah.
It just has God and all over.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And that just blesses David from just all through this scenario.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you know, what we're trying to emphasize. I mean, God is just blessing David, which he said he would, right? Back in 2 Samuel 7, right? But God has been blessing David and blessing him and blessing him again. But David is trusting God, is right. I mean, this is the way the relationship is supposed to work. David is trusting God, and God is blessing him. Yeah, did you?
Yeah, I just love that reading. You just take the phrase and started in verse 6. David was great in distress, but David strengthened himself in his mouth, the Lord of God. David inquired of the Lord, and David recovered all. It's a great pattern that he does a lot.
Exactly. And we don't always see that, right? When we're in the distressing moment, we don't always see that coming, but that's where the trust in God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so there's some follow-up to this. Then on the way back, we find out that included in David's men are some who are wicked and worthless. And why? Why are they described that way? Okay, they're greedy. Yes. Specifically, why?
They selfish,
Yeah, they're selfish. They don't want to share the spoil.
exactly.
They don't even want to share it with the 200 men who are back at the brook, who were tired, but they didn't go into the battle. But they don't want to share with them. Yeah.
When David says, "No, my brothers, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us." So they were claiming the victory for themselves, and therefore all the spoils for themselves, instead of looking at it like the Lord has given this to us. Don't be selfish with what the Lord has given you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly David's answer. They were, look, God gave us this, right? Okay, back to Dale's point, right? This wasn't because these guys were just amazing warriors, only the 400 of them, right? This was God's hand. God gave them that, and so they're going to share the spoils.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so how will we not share what God has given us? And so then it becomes a law then from then on in Israel that everyone gets a share of the spoil, right? Everyone gets a share of the blessing, right? It's not, well, some people did this and some these other guys, they didn't do very much. Everyone has a role, right? Even the guys who are just back watching the baggage, the supplies and everything. I mean, if nobody watches that and that gets stolen, that doesn't help either. And if they're watching the spoil, the other guys are free from that burden to go attack, right? So everybody has a role. Everyone gets a share of the blessings from God. But then David goes on, okay? David is going to share the gifts of the spoil with a bunch of other people, specifically who? Okay. Yeah. Okay, a bunch of cities that are in Judah. Okay? So these cities where David's been roaming around this whole time, right? We saw the map, he's been all over basically Judah's territory, running from Saul. And he's been raiding the Amalekites and other people who were raiding Judah's territory. So now he's going to give them a gift of the spoil, which he specifically says, a gift of the spoil from the enemies of God. Okay? So similar to what we've seen from, it's going to have the same effect as what we've seen, like when he would go and do raids and so on. He's inspiring loyalty from these people, especially from Judah. Okay, and that's going to come back. You're going to see that come back later. Okay, remember these were people; they were attacked by the Amalekites as well. So now he's giving them part of theirs. So it's really probably some of that stuff was already theirs. But he's going to inspire loyalty for them, and ultimately, this is going to pave the way for David to be king. Okay, so here's the map, same kind of map, but you see a bunch of cities over here on this, in Judah's territory over here. that are listed specifically as cities that got spoiled. One just to take note of is Hebron. Okay, that'll be important when we go into the next few chapters. All right, anything else on chapter 30? All right, let's look at 1 Chronicles chapter 12. We'll skip ahead, not really skipping ahead, but just skip to 1 Chronicles. Has some notes for us here. So 1 Chronicles chapter 12, someone just read verse 1. Yeah, it's in.
Now these are the men who had came to David at Ziklag while he was still restricted because of Saul the son of Kish. And they were among the mighty men who helped him in the war.
Okay, so chapter 12, or at least the first, 22 verses of chapter 12, are going to be a list of people who came to David and kind of joined his side while he's here at Ziklag, okay, during his time here at the Philistines, which we were told, I think in the previous chapter, he was there for a year and 4 months. During that time, certain men are coming to him, all right? Alright, so these are going to be defectors to David. So first of all, we're told about Benjamites in verses 1 through 7, lists some specific Benjamites. What's interesting about that?
It's Saul's tribe.
Yeah, it's Saul's tribe, and it even specifies that it's Saul's kinsmen. Right? So these are people you would expect to be on Saul's side, Saul's, family, tribe of Saul. Okay? There's a note there that they were bowmen and they could shoot arrows or sling stones with either the right or the left hand, which is kind of this interesting thing that we saw back in even in Judges. We'll see it again later about the use of the left hand. Okay, so it's going to list. It's going to list a lot of. It's got a list of the names of these Benjamites. In chapter 8, it lists Gadites. Okay, so these were people from Gad. All right, what does it tell us about these people? Like in verses 8. Well, yeah, what does it tell us about in verse 8? I'm sorry? Yeah, mighty men of valor. Their faces were like the faces of lions. They were swift as gazelles. Okay, they were expert with shield and spear. All right, so these are really good, experienced warriors. And it's going to list their names. And it says that down in verse 14, these guys, the worst one of them was as good as 100 regular warriors. And the best of them could take 1,000 regular warriors. Okay? So these are really experienced, impressive warriors. Alright, verses 19 through 22, then it lists some people from Manasseh. And it specifically says they deserted to David, verse 19, when he came with the Philistines for the battle against Saul. Okay? So when he goes up there to Aphek, initially to fight against Saul, but then it goes out and specifically says, he got sent home, so he didn't fight against Saul. But when he leaves and Achish sends him home, a bunch of guys desert Saul's army and go with David. Okay, so it's going to list their names. Similar thing, verse 21. And so they help David against the band of raiders. So when he goes down and fights these Amalekites, these guys are with him. And they were mighty men of valor, commanders in the army. Okay? And so then what does it say about all these people in verse 22, as all these people come to David, what does it say? Pam.
Just that they were like an army of God.
Yeah. So from day to day, throughout this time, more and more men are coming to David. These men are great warriors till it's like an army of God. Okay, which is a really interesting phrase. Well, maybe some things we can say about that. But for one thing, obviously, these guys, like I said, they're impressive warriors. But the whole point, again, is that this is about God. God is doing this, right? God is protecting David, setting him up to be the next king. Later on, then we'll stop there, but the rest of chapter 12 is going to talk about other men who come to him later on. We'll read about when he's in Hebron and he's going to be made king. Okay. Any other thoughts on that section? Yeah.
Well, not this section, but maybe I'm thinking ahead.
Okay.
These men were Saul at this time. He probably wouldn't have died in 31 Samuel.
That's very possible. I mean, yeah. So again, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you can say, yeah, obviously, at this point, we know God has decided what's going to happen to Saul in chapter 31. But, like you said, there's one reason is getting rid of these guys. They're not on Saul's side, they're on David's side. Yeah, good point. And that's going to be important as we go through the next story, too, when you get into 2 Samuel. Yeah.
I think I said this last week, but Saul chased away his best asset.
Yeah.
In David.
Yeah.
I think if he had David leading his army, he probably never would have lost to David.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, so he chased away his greatest asset in David, and so all these other guys are now they're following David too, right? And that makes sense. I mean, if you're a great warrior, are you inspired by Saul's leadership and want to stay with Saul? No, I mean, people are recognizing. Remember, all the way back from the very beginning, it talked about how David was, growing in the sight of all the people and all these things. So people are recognizing, what David has, his courage. They're recognizing God is on his side. And so these are the type of people that are, leaving Saul and going to David. All right, so that brings us back then to 2 Samuel and chapter 31. All right, so at that point we go back to then the story of the Philistines against Saul. And this is, immediately after Saul has consulted with the medium and had his conversation with Samuel. So the Philistines then engage the fight against Israel, and who wins? The Philistines win. Okay. So we have some details about the battle here. All right. So immediately we're told that the Philistines, verse 2, overtook Saul and his sons. The Philistines struck down Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. So all of his sons died in the battle. And then as the battle goes on, we're told they pressed hard against Saul, and the archers found him, so he gets wounded by the archers. And what happens after that with Saul specifically? Yeah. Yeah, okay, so he's been wounded. It's a mortal wound, but he's not dead yet. He wants his armor bearer then to kill him with his sword so that he doesn't, get finished off by the Philistines. What does the armor bearer do?
Refuses.
He refuses. Okay? And it says because he was afraid greatly. And you can understand that would not be a fun position to be the one who killed the king. So what does Saul do? Yeah, he falls on his own sword and ultimately kills himself. Okay? So verse 8 then specifically tells us that all three, so that Saul, his three sons, his armor bearer, all his men, all die on the same day together. In this battle against the Philistines. The story though goes on, and there's going to be some insult to injury then. What do the Philistines do the next day after the battle? The Philistines come through the battleground to find the spoil, and what did they find?
They found all of them, and then they stripped them of their armor. They cut off Saul's head, and they I don't know how they did it, but they mounted them on the walls of the city.
Yeah.
And, made them, I guess, a trophy.
Yeah. So they cut off Saul's head, they parade his armor back through Philistines territory, and specifically then even in the temple of Ashtaroth, okay, so one of their gods. They hang and later on we're told the body of his sons as well are hung there on the wall of Shan. And so there's, not only does Saul die, but he suffers, great indignity as well, as he's basically paraded as a trophy for the Philistines. Okay. In some ways, it's similar to what David did after he defeated Goliath, right? Remember, he had the armor and the sword and all that. So, some way similar to that, but now it's reversed. Now it's Israel's enemies. It's the Philistines who are the one parading Israel's king as a trophy. Okay? But then we're told somebody comes and saves the body of Saul and his sons. And who is that? Or what town, I guess? Jabesh Gilead. Why would they be the ones who come to take the body of Saul?
Because they were the ones where Saul fought his first battle.
Yeah.
He saved them from having their right eye gouged out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All the way back in chapter 11, the one battle that Saul really won at the very beginning that kind of established him as the king was when Jabesh Gilead was under attack, and that was the town he went and saved. So they're the ones who come and take his body down off of the wall and give him and Jonathan and his sons an actual burial. Okay? We're told specifically in verse 7 then that the Philistines came and lived in these territories, so the city. So when Saul and his army goes and falls, then the people who see that flee, the Israelites in these towns of the area flee. They leave their towns and the Philistines come and are taking and are occupying Israel's territory. Okay? I'll show you some on a map there in a minute. Okay, so that's really it. That's the story there of the end of Saul, the end of his sons. Turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verses 13 and 14. 1 Chronicles adds kind of an epilogue or a summary for us here. 1 Chronicles 10, 13 and 14. Someone read those two verses for us. Go ahead, Cindy.
Wait a minute, you said which one?
1 Chronicles 10, verses 13 and 14.
So Saul died for his trespass which he committed against the Lord because of the word of the Lord, which he did not keep, also because he asked counsel of the medium, making inquiry of it, and did not require of the Lord. Therefore he killed them and turned the kingdom to David, the son of Jesse.
Okay. So, why does it say that he was killed in this instance? Yeah.
Because he was told that when he ripped Samuel's robe, he tore the kingdom away.
Okay, yes. So, God had already pronounced judgment on Saul previously, right? With the kingdom had been torn away, he was told that his line was not going to continue for his previous sins, okay? But it specifically says in this case that he died in this case because he went and consulted the medium. And he decided, and it specifically says that he seeking guidance from a medium rather than consulting God. Now, remember the story. Did he try to consult God?
He tried, but it was
right at the very end, but he spent his whole life not consulting God. Right? And so the summary here is that he didn't consult God, even though right at the very end he was trying to consult God, but God had already left at that point, okay? And like we said, that wasn't really a true, certainly a genuinely seeking God's guidance, right? He was just asking for help in the situation, but now that he was in trouble, okay? So, therefore, the Lord put him to death and turned the kingdom over to David, all right? So that's what we'll read about coming up. But it's just interesting, he died for his breach of faith in consulting a medium. In Leviticus 20 verse 6, in the law of David, or the law of Moses, specifically condemned consulting mediums.
Yeah.
So does God mean what he says?
Yep.
Yes, he does. Okay? And that was kind of the final straw that actually caused Saul's death. So when we think about Saul, we also kind of are putting in some ways, I guess, a wrap on the people's demand for a king, right? Remember, the people demanded a king, and God gave them a king, and he gave them Saul, and how did that work out for them?
Didn't work out.
Not well at all, okay? Did he win all the battles that they wanted to go, a man to lead us in our battles? No, very few. Maybe one that we're told of anyway. Some others that suggested maybe he won some others, but for the most part, no, okay? It's just kind of a long, tragic story, right? Okay, so here's a map of what we were talking about. So this area up here, you see from Aphek is what we talked about previously. The battle actually moves up towards Jezreel. You see that, you notice that the people, Israel's army, Saul's army fell back all the way down Gilboa where it says they were slain. And you see that Shean there, right over by the Jordan River. And then it mentions when it says that the people fled their cities, even all the way to the other side of the Jordan. People fled their cities. And then so that kind of that whole area there in that box at that point is going to be controlled and occupied by the Philistines. Okay. All right, so I asked you guys to think about some similarities of the downfall and the death of Eli and Saul. So what similarities, I think I asked that. Okay. What similarities did you come up with?
Well, in short, they were both leaders who felt who left God and leaned on their own understanding and came up with their own solution. Died pretty sad death, and he fell off of his, busted his head, so to speak. He died because he found out about his son dying. And then, Saul, he definitely left God's good graces to do his own thing,
Yeah, okay, so both of them, it was a clear judgment from God. You mentioned their sons. In both cases, their sons died at the same time, the same day that they died. All right, other similarities that you guys noticed? Yeah.
They were both lazy and fearful, so that we
Yes.
stay back and let everybody else take care of it.
Yes, they were both characterized by inaction. Okay, Saul for sure characterized by fear. Okay. So a lot of this is in the wording, but there are some specific similarities. Both of them, there was a battle against the Philistines. Both of them, and specifically, so this is going back to chapter 4 now of Eli. Specifically, that battle was at Aphek, or just began at Aphek in both cases. In both cases, there's kind of a last-ditch attempt for God's help. Remember with Eli, they went and got the ark, whereas Saul went and consulted with the medium. It specifically uses the language that Israel fled and was slain by the Philistines in both cases. Both cases, their sons died in the battle. In both cases, the father died on the same day. It most specifically mentions they fell in death. Okay, so remember how Eli fell? He was in his chair, and he was heavy, and the chair fell over. He died. Saul fell on his sword when he died. Okay? There's a similar lament in both cases. Remember back with Eli, let me get it right. It was his daughter-in-law, I think, but had the son Ichabod, right? Named him Ichabod because the glory has departed. Right? If you go into chapter 1, which we'll cover on Sunday, but into second. I don't know why that says 2 Samuel chapter 1. I think that's the wrong reference. Anyway, when you go into the lament, I think it's in 1 Kings. Right. Yes, okay, so David laments over Jonathan and Saul. That should be 1 Kings chapter 1. And it mentions the same thing about the glory departing from Israel. Okay? But then there's a new hope, right? There's someone coming up, Samuel, to follow Eli, and of course David is going to replace Saul. Right? So I think scriptures are clearly trying kind of bookends, is clearly trying to draw that comparison for us of Eli and Saul. Which I will add, and I haven't mentioned this a lot, but there's a lot of comparisons to Saul to the judges. And pointing back to the fact that Saul was made a king, but he basically just acted like the judges and really the worst of the judges. Okay? So with Saul, just going back in my head, he made rash vows, right? Just like we saw with Jephthah. And I'm trying to remember them all besides this. But throughout it, when you start to see it, you start realizing, again, it's the same point. People wanted a king, but Saul basically acted just like the judges they already had. Okay, they're constantly fighting and losing against the Philistines unless David is leading. Right? Okay. Any thoughts or comments on that? Yeah. Yes. Yes, that's a very good point. Remember, Saul has faced with the Amalekites before when he should have utterly destroyed them. Okay, but he did not. Okay? And so, yeah, so again, it's a very good point. Yeah. So we see David now facing off against and destroying the Amalekites. Yeah.
And you got to know the lie about the beginning. Because he lied to Samuel, mounted the line of God, and he did everything God told him to do. And Samuel said, "What is this bleating of the sheep that I hear?"
Yeah.
So he lied. He lied.
Yes. Yes. Anything else? All right. So let's just think about the last couple of minutes, our applications for today. Number one, like we talked about what David did, when in distress, strengthen yourself in God. Okay, that's the number one thing. Ask God what to do. Get him to consult with God, not with other people, right? There's a lot of people consult a lot of things. Even Christians. What are things that even Christians, that when we're in distress, what are we tempted to consult other than God? Friends?
Social media.
Social media? The internet? Yes?
Or do it ourselves.
Do it ourselves? Yes? Okay, so instead of strengthening ourselves with God, we just try to strengthen ourselves, right? Find we're just stronger. Okay? What else?
Lucky Charms.
Lucky Charms? Okay, yes, very good. Like Saul? Saul, yes, good. Okay? Yeah? Yeah, psychics, astrology, and Vince's sermon from a few weeks ago, he was talking about, I didn't even know, but apparently it's very popular, astrology and all that is very popular again with young people. I had no idea. But yeah, people still do that, okay? We consult medicine, doctors, right? And not that none of those things don't have a place, right? Therapists. But are all those things going to replace consulting God? No. Right? At most, all those things, and some of those things are just sinful, okay? But if it's not sinful, at best, it's consulting along with God, right? That's where the ultimate source is, okay? Ask God what to do, and when you find out, do it, okay? All right, when we serve God, He turns our trials into blessings, okay? Like with David. Even the worst trials, the most distressing things can turn into blessings. And then when He blesses us, we can bless others, like David, right? He was giving the spoils to all kinds of people around him. Because God blessed him, then he can bless others. Okay? Oh, sorry. And then Saul. Saul became God's enemy. Someone turn back to read chapter 28 and verse 16. So this is Samuel, when Samuel is appearing to through the medium. 28 verse 16. This is 1 Samuel 28, 16. Anybody there? Yeah.
And Samuel said, why do you ask me, seeing the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy?
So this is what we've been talking about all along, that God had become his enemy. Here, Samuel just says it outright. Samuel made himself God's enemy. Fear, disobedience, concern for himself ruled his whole life. He never responded to correction. He had opportunities God gave him to correct. He never responded. Proverbs 13, verse 15 says, the way of the transgressor is hard. And I think that describes Saul's life. His life was just hard because he was a transgressor. He didn't choose to serve God, and his life was hard.
I don't know if you guys talked about this Sunday, about God indulging in this, where he actually presents Samuel to talk to him.
Yes.
What did you guys, I know what we talked about down in our class, but what did you guys talk about?
I think the same thing, that because based on the medium's reaction, that she was surprised, right? She screamed, that yeah, this was God. She wasn't normally able to do this, but this was God actually sending Samuel in to send a judgment to Saul. So yeah, that's sort of what I think, and that's what we talked about.
Okay, did you guys talk at all about God's reasoning for this? Because he's condemning Saul for this, but yet he indulged in that behavior as well.
I'm not sure if we talked about it. Do you have a thought on it, or you're just asking me questions?
I'm open.
I mean, I think my thought is that, yeah, God indulged it, but it was still wrong. God used it as an opportunity to give the prophecy against Saul, even specifically for what he was doing in that moment. That doesn't make it right. It's just God used that to send the prophecy.
Just like he will use people in our life to convey a message or make a point or whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, last comment, our time's gone.
I didn't think, that, he sent Saul or Samuel, because Samuel said it, why ask me, he said, the Lord has left you on your enemy.
Yeah.
Point, that's the point.
Right.
God is your enemy, you're not going to win nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so for Sunday, chapters 1 and 2, 2 Samuel 1 and 2. Thank you.